We've all heard the phrase, saved by the bell. Usually it means you just escaped a tough spot. The teacher was about to call on you in class, but the school bell rang. You were about to lose an argument, but the timer buzzed. It's lighthearted, funny, but what if I told you this innocent phrase may have its roots in something far darker, something terrifying? Because once upon a time, being saved by the bell wasn't about class or sports. It was about being buried alive and ringing for your life. Picture yourself in the 1700s. No modern hospitals, no advanced machines to tell if someone is alive or dead. Doctors rely on sight and touch alone. If your breathing slowed, if your body stiffened, you might be declared dead, even if you weren't. And once the grave was sealed, you'd realize the mistake in the most horrifying way possible. Alone, underground, with no way out. This wasn't fantasy. It was a real fear and a real problem. The medical condition, catalepsy. The medical term was catalepsy, a rare condition where a person falls into a death-like trance. Their body stiffens. Breathing slows to a faint whisper. Their pulse becomes so weak, it seems to vanish. To onlookers, the victim appeared lifeless. And in a world without heart monitors, without medical tests, the living were often mistaken for the dead. Families mourned. Bodies were placed in coffins. Burials took place quickly, sometimes within a day. But those corpses weren't always corpses at all. Gravediggers told stories of opening caskets years later, only to find them clawed from the inside. Skeletal hands frozen in desperate poses. Splintered wood scratched by fingernails. Teeth marks where the victim had tried to bite their way out. The terror of premature burial spread like wildfire. Pamphlets and books in the 18th and 19th centuries warned of the danger. Newspapers reported suspected cases. The public imagination was captured by one of the worst fates a human being could imagine: to be awake, trapped in your own grave. The invention of the safety coffin. The fear was so widespread that inventors stepped in. They designed safety coffins. These strange contraptions had bells, flags, or even breathing tubes connected to the surface. The idea was simple. If the person inside the coffin woke up, they could tug a string connected to a bell above ground. The bell would ring, alerting a watchman or passerby, and the dead would be dug up in time. Some designs even had glass panels or feeding tubes, just in case. It sounds bizarre, but patents for these coffins were real, and they were sold to families desperate to protect their loved ones from premature burial. In some cemeteries, dead houses were built. Corpses were stored for days before burial to ensure no one was interred alive. In other places, watchmen were paid to sit by fresh graves for several nights, listening for bells. Imagine the eerie sound of a lone bell ringing in the dead of night, in a cemetery where no living person should be. Sometimes it was just the wind. Sometimes it was animals. But other times, it might have been the voice of the living, crying out from the earth. History is littered with disturbing tales of the people narrowly escaping or failing to escape. One story tells of a woman in the 19th century declared dead after a sudden illness. She was buried quickly, but when her grave was reopened years later, her body was twisted and clawed, evidence she had been alive when she went into the ground. Another tale speaks of a man who woke up inside his coffin and managed to ring his safety bell. The gravediggers rushed back, pulled him out, and saved him. at the very last moment. These stories terrified the public, and whether all of them were true or not, they fueled the legend. The phrase, saved by the bell. Now, historians debate the true origin of the phrase. Some say it comes from boxing, when a fighter is losing badly, but the bell ends the round and spares him from defeat. That explanation makes sense, and it's the safe one. But for many, the darker version is far more compelling, because the idea of literally being saved from the grave by the ringing of a bell was once very real. When people said saved by the bell in centuries past, they may have meant it literally. Why the fear was so strong? Think about it. Today, death feels certain. We trust doctors. We have machines to confirm. But centuries ago, there was doubt. People could appear dead and then return to life. What did that mean for the soul? For heaven and hell? For the fear of death itself? To be buried alive wasn't just a medical mistake. It was a spiritual nightmare, trapped between life and death, between this world and the next. Some even linked premature burial to supernatural forces. Stories circulated of vampires or the undead rising from graves, when in truth, it may have been people wrongly buried alive. The line between folklore and fact blurred. Safety coffins weren't just inventions. They were talismans against the ultimate fear. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, medicine improved. The fear of premature burial slowly faded, but the phrase, saved by the bell, lived on. Most people today don't know its darker meaning. They laugh when they say it. They don't hear the echoes of clawing fingernails or bells ringing from beneath the soil. But now, you do. So the next time you escape a close call and say you were saved by the bell, think about where those words might have come from. Imagine lying in the dark, breath shallow, chest tight, hearing the thud of earth on the coffin above, and realizing you aren't dead. All you have is a rope tied to a bell. You pull. The bell rings in the night, and somewhere a watchman hears. Maybe he saves you. Maybe he doesn't. Because in the end, to be saved by the bell isn't just an expression. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest stories hide in the phrases we say every day.